Romans 7 1-25, through the Bible. Chapter 7. Theme, Shackles of a Saved Soul, Struggle of a Saved Soul. The theme of sanctification began in the latter part of chapter 5, where it was potential sanctification. Then, in chapter 6, we saw positional sanctification, that is, identification with Christ in his death and resurrection. We are to reckon on that, present ourselves to him, and trust him to live the Christian life through us. Now, in the chapter before us, there are two subjects, the shackles of a saved soul and the struggle of a saved soul. The law cannot produce sanctification in the life of the believer, it merely shackles it. Neither can the believer produce sanctification in his life by depending on the desire of the new nature. Just to say you want to live for Christ won't get you anywhere. You need to present yourself to him, recognizing that you are joined to the living Christ. The importance of this chapter cannot be overemphasized. Let me give you a quotation from Dr. Griffith Thomas. Dr. Alexander White once said that whenever a new book on Romans comes out, and is sent to him by its publisher for consideration, he at once turns to the comments on chapter 7, and according to the view taken of that important section, he decides on the value of the entire work. Then Dr. Frederick Godet makes this bold statement, but it is 100 to 1, when a reader does not find the Apostle Paul logical, that he is not understanding his thought. Paul is certainly logical all through this chapter. When I was a young man, a very wonderful itinerant Bible teacher, who was a great blessing to multitudes of folk, was a great help to me. He was never a pastor, and he taught that we are to detour around the 7th chapter of Romans. We are not to live there. We are to get into the 8th chapter of Romans. For several years, I taught that philosophy also. But I have now been a pastor for a long time, and I have come to the conclusion that we are not to miss the 7th chapter of Romans. I am sure that many a pastor wishes his church members would get into the 7th of Romans, because the man who gets into the 7th of Romans will get into the 8th of Romans. I am of the opinion that the way into the 8th chapter is through the 7th chapter. At least, that is the route most of us take. Well, you are not to detour around it, because if you do, you are not on the direct route. It reminds me of a jingle, to dwell above, with the saints in love. Oh, that will be glory. But to stay below, with the saints I know, that's another story. In this struggle of a saved soul, a believer reaches out and grabs a straw. Sometimes, that straw is the Mosaic law, and he finds that he has gotten hold, not of a straw, nor even of a life preserver, but actually of a sack of cement, and it is pulling him under. He can't live that way. As a result, multitudes of saints accept defeat as normal Christian living. There are many saints who are satisfied to continue on the low level of a sad, shoddy, sloppy life. God doesn't want us to come that route. The powerless sanctification of this chapter shows us the way we are not to live. Many years ago, a cartoon appeared in a daily paper, when it was popular to make things and repair things yourself, showing a mild-mannered man in a do-it-yourself shop. His hands were bandaged, and one arm was in a sling. He was asking the clerk behind the counter, "Do you have any undo-it-yourself kits?" Today, we as believers need to know that we cannot live the Christian life. We need to learn that we cannot do it ourselves. In fact, we need an undo-it-yourself kit. That is, we need to turn our lives over to the Spirit of God, yield to him, and let him do for us what we cannot do ourselves. The Mosaic law is where many Christians go to try to find Christian living. Now, Paul is going to show that the Mosaic law has no claim on the believer. Actually, the law condemned man to die. It was a ministration of condemnation. 2 Corinthians 3:9. You don't contact the judge who sentenced you to die, and ask him how you are going to live.